So now that we've done the heel turn, it's time to work on the gusset. So the gusset, it's the part that attaches our heel flap and heel turn to the rest of our sock. So this kind of triangular shape here, that's our gusset. You might be able to better see it on the purple one. This section right here is our gusset. So we return to working in the round for this section. We have our heel flap and our heel turn, but then the rest of our stitches are all the way down here. So we have to connect them. So in order to do that, we're going to knit across our current stitches, pick up some stitches along here, work across our needle 2, pick up some stitches along here. It'll feel a little bit clunky and weird for a few rows, but once you get a few rows into it and you start decreasing, you'll really start to get the rhythm of it and it will feel a lot more comfortable. We're going to be resuming working in the round. So for setup round 1, this is still needle 1 because if you go all the way down, our marker is still here. So I'm actually going to move my marker up so it's a little bit easier to tell. So I'm just going to put it in the fabric just below my current stitches. And now I'm going to knit across needle 1, pick up and knit 1 stitch for every slip stitch along the heel flap, and then pick up 1 additional stitch to close the gap between your current needle and needle 2. If we look along our heel flap edge, you can kind of see some V's. These are slip stitches. So like here's one, here's one, here's one, and just all the way down you should have a line of slip stitches. It's the furthest most stitch. It kind of looks curled in too. Okay, all the way down we have these. We're going to be picking these up. And then when we get down to the edge, we'll pick up one along here, just so that there's not a gap between these stitches and our needle 2 stitches. You can pick these stitches up with your knitting needle or a crochet hook. If you find it easier to use a crochet hook, you can do that as well. I'll show you both methods. So go ahead and knit across needle 1. Remember, you should have as many stitches as it says here. If you have too many, you did not do enough repeats of rows 3 and 4 from the heel turn. You need to make sure that you have the correct count here because this will give you the correct amount when we are finished with our gusset. I've knit across here. So now I'm going to drop my left hand needle for now. And now you see this line here. We're going to pick up the first one there. So I'll show you with my crochet hook first, but you can also use your knitting needle. So this does not have to be extremely exact. You know, if you're not quite sure if one is a slip stitch, but there would be a big gap if you didn't pick it up, go ahead and pick it up. This does not have to be super, super exact. The thing that you want is you want to have the same amount picked up on one half as you do on the other half. So keep track of how many you've picked up on one so that you can be sure to pick up the same amount on the other. So my first V looks to be about right here. So either with a crochet hook in like this, going in towards the heel flap, you can pick one up, you can like yarn over, pull a loop through, and then put it on your needle. That works. Or you can just kind of take your needle and go underneath both sets of that V, yarn over, pull a loop through. Okay? You can do it either way. I think it's easier with a knitting needle, but if you're having trouble hooking it, you can always use a crochet hook. Yarn over, pull through, and then put it on your needle that way. So there's one. And then if I look down, you just kind of see this column of V's that go like this. So we're going to go from the outside in with our knitting needle and pick them up, or your crochet hook and pick them up, all the way down. Do you see the next V there? Right here? I'm going to go from the outside in, underneath both halves of that V, yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, and there's another stitch on my needle. Again, you can also take your crochet hook, see the next V, go underneath it. You can also do this, yarn over, pull a loop through, and put it on your knitting needle. So do this all the way down. You want these stitches to feel about as loose as your current stitches on your needle. So not too loose, not too tight. Underneath both legs, yarn over, pull through. Underneath both legs, yarn over, pull through. all the way down. Okay, so now I've gotten down to about the end. I don't see any more slip stitch V's. There are no V's that are really prominent. These just look like normal knit stitches, okay? But there's a pretty big gap right here. You see from my last stitch to my next one, somewhere in between the bottom of this stitch and the bottom of this stitch. I'll first show you with the crochet hook because I think it's a little bit easier to see it that way. It does not matter where you pick it up. You could go underneath these two. You could go underneath just straight in like this. Just somewhere here, you want to pick up a stitch. I'm going to go into like half a stitch straight through, so I kind of have 2 loops on my crochet hook. You can also use your knitting needle. Yarn over it from front to back, pull a loop through, and then slide that one onto your knitting needle. So I'll show that to you with the knitting needle next. So just stick your knitting needle either underneath a couple loops of a stitch or just straight through. So I still have kind of 2 legs of something there. Yarn over, pull through, and there you have it. So I originally had 8 stitches, so I count 8 over, 2, 4, 6, 8. So now I'm going to count how many I have here. So I picked up 12 from the edge of my heel flap and 1 extra down here to prevent any holes. So I need to pick up 13 on the other half. Okay, so be sure to write that down to keep track. So now this is going to feel wonky, but you're going to go ahead and kind of turn your work a little bit. Slide your resting stitches back onto this needle. So we're going to be knitting across needle 2 stitches here and then picking up stitches along the other half of our heel flap. I can pull out the back needle. You can kind of push them together like this and then pull out the back needle. Go ahead and knit across these current needle 2 stitches. So now we have all of this heel flap here that we need to pick up. So in order to be symmetrical, you want to pick up the same amount that you picked up on the other half. So I have 13 that I picked up on the other half, 1 to close the gap to prevent any holes, and then 12 along the side of the heel flap. This one can feel kind of clunky, but I'm going to pull on this just to get myself a little bit of extra cord. Kind of scrunch up my stitches on needle 2. If this is too clunky, it might be easier with a crochet hook. If I were to start picking up on my heel flap right now, I would have a hole in between my needle 2 stitches and my heel flap stitches. So the same thing that we did on the other side where we kind of picked up one here to prevent that hole, you can use a crochet hook, stick your needle or your crochet hook in there, yarn over, pull a loop through, and then slide that onto your needle 2. You can also do it with your needle. It helps to have most of your stitches scrunched up here closer to the tip of the needle. You can also just take your needle through a stitch or 2, yarn over, pull through, and you've picked one up that way. Do you see how we have a line of V's here? They look like this, going all the way up. We're going to go from the outside in, so this direction, and pick those up the same way that we picked them up on the other side. So you can use a crochet hook or a knitting needle. So here's the first one that I see. You can see it right here. Looks like a V. Take your needle and go underneath both legs of that, from front to back, underneath both legs, yarn over, pull through, and there you go. So there's one. Do you see the next one right here? Looks like a V. Go underneath both legs of that, from front to back, like this, right there, yarn over, pull through. What's the next one, which is right about here. And then we yarn over from front to back, pull a loop underneath both those legs, and you just do that until you have as many that you need to match the other side. So remember, I needed to pick up 1 to prevent a hole and then 12 along the side of this heel flap. I'm gonna keep going, and I'll check my count along the way here in a second. This is going to feel really cumbersome. Your stitches are going to feel like they're being stretched. You can always scrunch up these needle 2 stitches. That's what I do. I think that makes it a little bit easier. Also using a crochet hook will help. If I look down, here's all the stitches I've picked up so far. So 1 to prevent a hole, and then I should have 12. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. I need to pick up one more. If you don't see an easily identifiable slip stitch, just do your best to pick up an edge stitch here. You can kind of see this is 2 loops that create a V. Yarn over, pull loop through. There you have it. I've picked up 13 total stitches. Now this looks really wonky, right? But go ahead and turn your work. Push your stitches up onto your closer needle. So currently, this is needle 1 because it has our beginning of round marker, and this is needle 2. And it has all the gusset stitches, so you should have a lot of stitches right now. The longer you made your heel flap, the more stitches you'll have now. We're going to start decreasing a lot of stitches, so it will start to take shape, and it will start to get a lot easier to manage. It's kind of like this. So right now we're doing this section here. We're kind of turning this sock so that we have this curve for our heel. So now it's time to work the rest of the gusset. So at this point you'll need a couple of stitch markers. If you don't have stitch markers, you can just make a couple slip knots with yarn and create your own makeshift stitch markers that way. For setup round 2, you're going to knit a certain amount of stitches, place a marker, and then knit across for needle 1. And then for needle 2, you're going to knit a certain amount of stitches, place a marker, knit across. The amount of stitches are different for every size, so you can go ahead and refer to what's written on screen. For setup round 2, needle 1, I'm working size 2, so I knit 10, place a marker, and then knit the rest of the needle. So go ahead and pull out the back needle like we do with every other magic loop row. This is going to feel really clunky for a few rows, but stick with it. You can scrunch up your stitches a lot if you need to, if that makes it easier. So now I need to knit 10 stitches. So go into the front loop of the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Since we're working in the round again, I go into the second stitch like normal, pull a little bit extra. Did you see how my cord kind of closed up there? We're trying to prevent any holes. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. And then just knit normally for either 10, 12, or 13 stitches depending on your size. So I have knit 10 stitches, so now I'm going to place a marker on my right hand needle and then knit across the rest of your needle 1 stitches. Go ahead and turn your work. You can let go of your left needle and turn, and then push the stitches up onto your closer needle. You can kind of slide them off the back if they look like they're going to fall off. Bring our yarn in between our needles to the middle. Pull out that back needle, and you're going to knit a certain amount of stitches, place a marker, knit across. So I'm working size 2, so I knit 17 and then place a marker, but refer to your size as written here. So go ahead and knit that many stitches. And remember, when you go into our second stitch, you pull a little extra tight, yarn over, pull through, slide off. So I have knit 17. I'm going to place a stitch marker on my right hand needle and knit across the rest of my needle 2 stitches. All right, I can let go of my left hand needle and turn my work. Slide my stitches up onto my closer needle, and that is your setup row 2 done. So now we get into our repeat. So for our repeat, round 1 will be a decrease round and round 2 will be plain. And you're going to repeat rounds 1 and 2 until you have only 2 stitches here on needle 1 in between the marker and the end of the needle, and only 4, 5, or 6 stitches at the end of needle 2 here. So I'll walk you through the first decrease round. Pull out the back needle. So for round 1, which is our decrease round, we're going to knit to the marker, slip marker, knit to the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together, knit 1. So go ahead and knit to the marker. And remember, when you go into the second stitch of your row, you pull a little extra tight. Now I've reached the marker, so I'm going to slip it from one needle to the next. And now I need to knit until there are only 3 stitches left on my needle. I have 3 stitches left on my left hand needle here. So I'm going to work a knit 2 together, knit 1. So a knit 2 together, if you've never done one, you basically go into 2 stitches at the same time. The same way you would knit 1 stitch, you go into 2 and you knit them together. So instead of going into the front loop of that first stitch like this, you go into the second from the end and the first from the end. And you crisscross your needles like this. Yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, and slide off. And then I like to kind of tighten it up a little bit because it tends to leave a gap if I don't. And then I yarn over and knit the next stitch normally. That's the first half of our row done. Go ahead and turn your work. And as always, slide your stitches onto your closer needle. Pull out your back needle. And for needle 2, you're going to knit to the marker, slip marker, knit 1, SSK, knit to the end. Go ahead and knit to the marker. And when you go into the second stitch from the end, you pull a little bit tighter and then just knit it normally. Okay, I've knit to the marker, so I just need to slip it from one needle to the other. And now I'm going to work a knit 1, SSK, and then knit to the end. So go ahead and knit 1 stitch. And now we're going to work in SSK. I slip 1 as if to knit, slip 1 as if to purl, and then knit those 2 stitches together through the back loop. I slip 1 as if to knit, slip 1 as if to purl into the front loops of both of those stitches. At the same time, yarn over, pull a loop through, and slide off. And then I like to pull a little bit tighter just to kind of close any gap it might have. And then I knit to the end of the row. So you have just decreased 2 stitches, 1 on each needle. Round 2 is just a plain row. So you knit across, slipping the markers as you come to them. So I'll show you how to do that. Pull out the back needle and then begin to knit across needle 1. So remember, when you go into the second stitch, pull a little extra tight and then continue knitting. And when you get to the marker, you're just going to slip it from one needle to the next and keep going. Go ahead and turn your work. Slide your stitches up onto your closer needle. Pull out the back needle, and the same thing on these stitches. You knit across until you get to the marker and you slip the marker. Remember that when you go into the second stitch, you always pull a little extra tight before you knit it. Then when you get to the marker, you just slip it and continue knitting across. At the end, go ahead and turn your work, and that's it. That is your plain round. So now you just repeat rounds 1 and 2 until you have only 2 stitches at the end of needle 1 separated by the marker, and until you have only 4, 5, or 6 stitches at the end of needle 2 separated by the marker. So at the very end, you should have the total stitch count as written here. It's the same stitch count that you had at the very beginning of your sock after you joined in the round. This is the stitch count that you had. So you should have that same amount at the end. So you should have 2 stitches here on needle 1 separated by the marker. And then when you turn your work on the gusset side of your marker, so the one that's not connected to your leg here, on this side, you should have either 4, 5, or 6 stitches separated by the marker. So go ahead and repeat rounds 1 and 2 until you have that stitch count left, and I'll meet you back here for the final gusset round. So now I've finished all my gusset repeats. It's starting to look a lot more like a sock. To double check, I'm supposed to have 2 stitches at the end of needle 1 separated by the marker, and I do. And then I'm supposed to have 5 stitches on the end of needle 2 separated by the marker, and I do. If, for example, you have 1 extra stitch, so you're supposed to have 2 here, but you have 3, but you have the correct at the end of the other needle, don't panic. You don't have to rip back or anything. Just work another set of repeats, but when it comes to your decrease row, only decrease on the half of your row that has an extra stitch, and then just work plain on the other side. I have 34 stitches, which is correct. I will have more stitches on needle 2 currently than needle 1. That's okay. We're about to redistribute our stitches. So for our final gusset round, we're going to knit to the marker, remove the marker, knit 2, and then you'll have X amount of stitches currently on needle 1. For me, I'm size 2, so I'll have 12 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and knit to the marker. We can remove the marker, knit to the end, and you should have this many stitches currently on needle 1. I do have 12, so I'm good. Go ahead and turn your work. So for needle 2, we're going to knit to the marker, remove the marker, and then slip the remaining 4, 5, or 6 stitches to needle 1. So for me, it'll be the remaining 5. So go ahead and knit to the marker. So I've knit to the marker, so I can go ahead and remove the marker. And now in order to slip the remaining 4, 5, or 6 stitches, in my case it's 5, to the other needle, all you have to do is pull on the left needle and they'll slide onto the other half. So pull on it, and you've just transferred those stitches to the other half. You should have this many stitches on needle 2. You should now have the same number of stitches on needle 1 and needle 2. So I have 17 stitches on both needles as I'm supposed to, for a total of 34. So now we've decreased all the way down to our original stitch count, and we've redistributed our stitches. So you can see how we have the beginnings of our sock. You are right about here. So you've gotten down to your regular stitch count, and now you just need to knit the foot.